Let's check out this video. The Blue Protocol, the JP situation is not good. This is another game that I'm looking forward to, but I don't know, man. It just seems like it's not going to be good. Let's see what's happening now.
So I wanted to communicate to everyone living outside Japan the situation with Blue Protocol. I haven't really seen anyone mention what's going on recently, and I thought it would be nice for people to know and understand exactly what's going on. Blue Protocol,
Other than wanting to play this game, don't really know much about it, if I'm honest. Haven't really been watching content on it. Haven't been following anybody who's been playing it or been making content. So hopefully we can get that. This is from a Cactus, smaller YouTube channel. Video's banging though, so it must be hitting some points that people are interested in.
Protocol has been getting updates every once a month, and now while that sounds nice,
It does seem like a lot of updates.
it hasn't really revitalized the game to what it once was on release or even a few months after release.
Okay.
The game has been
Maybe they're waiting for the global launch to really update a lot of stuff, potentially. But doesn't sound promising.
steadily declining in popularity in the JP region and hasn't experienced any sustainable recovery in its 1 year of service, which is
It's been a year now, it's been in
really
Japan.
sad to see, as I'm a fan of this game since I've heard about it back in 2019, where I saw the game having so much potential.
Dawn Trail right
but
at the top.
It's getting very mismanaged so far.
Visually, that
So
looks
before I dive
beautiful.
deep into this topic, a little backstory about me. I did play the game for about 2,000 hours and maxed every class.
That's a lot of hours.
I also placed top 3 in a few of the game's leaderboards.
Okay, so the dude's no scrub. He knows, well, I'm going to assume he knows what he's talking about. He obviously knows what he's doing.
text guides here and there. I love this game. I love to beta test it so that the overseas version can be better. But recently, I and many friends that also played are starting to push away and cut a lot of playtime from this game. It's core problems and bugs that have not been fixed that are killing off the player base.
That sucks to hear.
It's pretty evident that the game isn't doing well when you look at statistics.
Damn, it's fell in the
According to
top
people in
100.
5chan, Japan's version of 4chan, Blue Protocol is currently ranked 119th place on games with total sales on Japan PlayStation.
That means that Genshin and Hoyo at the top there.
On 5chan, Japan's version of
Genshin, Elden Ring, Collapse Star Rail, Fantasy Star Online, Final Fantasy 14, Monster Hunter, Dragon Quest Online. It's a Dragon Quest Online game. I didn't know that. Fallout 26, I was going to say. I was thinking that was in the top 10 then.
4chan. Blue
Surprising to see
Protocol is
Fallout
currently
76 so high up.
119th place on
And this is
games
Japan.
with total sales on Japan PlayStation Store with a rating of 2.5.
Damn, Elder Scrolls is up
It
there as
has
well.
roughly stayed around that rating since the launch of console back in December 2023. The sales ranking tends to spike when the game gets a major update, but gradually goes down even further every time.
That makes sense. That's pretty much typical. Update happens, player base comes in to check out the update, player base plays the content that they want, player base goes back to whatever else they're playing. But to see it being a little pump within a continual drop down in a graph that's trending one way and downwards is not great, really.
It's important to note that console is
Damn, dude, it's below Tower of Fantasy. And Tower of Fantasy's fell off hard, hasn't it? And I've never played Tower of Fantasy. We are going to play Tower of Fantasy soon. We're going to try it out. But I've heard that game has had a massive fall off.
still huge in Japan. According to an article in 2023, over 70% of every JP gamer is using a console regularly. Now, I believe mobile likely overtook console in this year, but console should
And a lot of people love the Switches in Japan, though, don't they? No mobile gaming going on. Obviously, as well, talking about mobile's taking over everywhere, though, isn't it?
still be relatively.
I think, doesn't mobile make up for the majority of the player base now? It's like bigger than everything else put together. I could be wrong on that. I'm pretty sure I saw the pie chart. It's going back probably maybe even like a year now, actually. And I think like mobile represented like, I don't know, about 60% or something like that, or 50% of the entirety of gaming.
Up there. This means that the console ranking and rating paints a fairly accurate conclusion with how the game is holding up on both PC and console. Then you have a Japanese game journalist website saying that Bandai's Blue Protocol is part of the blame for Bandai losing profit in the current fiscal year. Bandai Online cutting around 16% of its staff of 250 employees since the start of this year. Players speculating how many concurrent users.
Dude, for a split second then, I thought that was in my head. I was like, am I tripping? What's going on with his voice?
Are left, which is estimated to be about 4,000, which lines up with how hard it is to make content if you aren't playing at very specific JP peak hours, and most of the open world zones being a ghost town supporting this.
It's a huge rabbit hole, but to summarize, the game isn't doing that great.
It's not good
Now,
to hear.
what are these
It's not even
issues that are
launched
holding this
globally
game
yet.
back? Well, the first is the lack of content. This has been a complaint since
The
the game
characters, dude, the visuals and the characters look gorgeous though. So vibrant and colourful. It just pops. And I love that.
launched, and very little has been done a year later.
The UI looks pretty nice
A
as well,
common
actually.
misconception is how people outside the JP region see JP getting all this content announced on live streams and assumes the game is doing well. Well, the reality is that JP is not doing well.
The thing is though, just because he's not doing well in Japan doesn't mean that's going to necessarily translate to the global launch. It's obviously, it's not a great indicator, but there's definitely different gaming trends in different parts of the world, especially in the West. Games that are massive in the West tend not to be so big in the East, don't they? That, you know, like China's market of games just dwarfs ours, and there's some games in there that most people have never even heard of that are just massive. I can't remember that shooter game now. It's a little bit like CS, and it's like insanely massive. And it's, I forgot the name of it now, but I remember watching a video about it and being like, I've never even heard of this game. So I guess obviously proof will be in the pudding when it comes to the West, but it doesn't necessarily, just because it's doing bad in Japan doesn't mean that's going to translate. But I guess we might get some explanation why, you know, that might be the case when it does come to the West as well.
Most
The
of
UI
the
looks
content
great,
is
though.
copy-pasted dungeons that have almost no exciting fights in them
Okay,
and
that's
many
not good.
uninspired map designs.
That's not good.
Almost every dungeon is run to the next room, gather all the enemies, elites, bosses together,
Dude, the
press
UI is
all
amazing. I love
buttons
it.
in almost any order, and then repeat until no more rooms. In a lot of
Okay,
cases,
that's not a
there's no
good-
strategy
good thing to
involved
hear, though.
After gathering the enemies, due to a bug that freezes all enemies, causing them to do nothing if too many skills are hitting too many enemies on the map. This has been a bug for almost a year
They
now,
flying
and
swords?
has hurt a lot of the potential the fights could have had. I don't
Dude.
believe that these specific pieces of
That's an insane bug not to fix, though.
content will get much better if Bandai fixes the bug, because there's still a core issue with the combat, which is DR, or damage reduction. So what do I mean by that? The game has too many ways of lowering damage taken to flat out negating damage altogether in some cases. Yes, you can take 0 damage. The DR system makes many forms of hard content too easy and makes farming content boring for many people. This is getting worse as more forms of DR are being introduced. Bandai doesn't seem to have acknowledged this
With Blue Protocol, is it being published by Bandai Namco as well? Let's just double check. Who is publishing Blue Protocol in the West? Amazon. I remember now, yeah, it's Amazon. So I was just about to say, if it's a different publisher, maybe we might see a different version, and some of that's, you know, Amazon. Not the best track record, I guess.
problem, which is unfortunate because, well, we're probably not going to see any changes done to this for a really long time.
The thing is, though, as
so
well, if it is dropping off in Japan and it's dropped off so hard, how long has that drop off been going on for? Because that could, and he did mention when he was talking about all the different stuff that it's been a large loss factor for Bandai Namco. So it's a good chance maybe that's why they're like, you know what, they're kind of scaling back and just leaving it to die, and they're making some money from Amazon. I don't know how exactly that deal's working, if they can obviously continue to make money from the Western launch.
About to finish editing this video, but wanted to include this bit of information because I felt it was important, because some of my information kind of sounded like it overlapped. If the content is too easy, then why isn't everyone pretty much clearing it, you know? The fact lies in how the game doesn't really teach the players how to play the game. Many players get to max level by pressing their auto attack and occasionally 1 to 2 skills. Let me show you an example of how to farm in the open world. Okay, so I was about to show an example of open world leveling, but turns out most of the open world leveling zones are pretty dead with no players. No big surprise there. So I'm just going to demonstrate it by open world farming, which is pretty much the same as open world leveling. So pretty much you just sit in one spot, press lock on,
Eesh.
spam your basic skills.
Eesh, boys.
Yep, and this is pretty much it. We just stand in one spot.
Okay, that's gonna get boring fast. No wonder there's no people around there farming. So, have we got any footage of the game? We'll have a look at that in a bit. If we've got any footage of the game in the West, because I haven't really heard anything about it since. Because Throne and Liberty's coming September, so it seems like at the moment for Amazon that's the priority, because they are publishing Throne and Liberty as well, aren't they? I do believe. Don't quote me. I'm pretty sure that they are though. So it seems like Throne and Liberty seems like it's going to be their priority for now. So I'm guessing we're not going to see Blue Protocol this year. But does that mean that hopefully that means they are seeing what's going on in Japan and the Western launch might take priority, and in terms of what they're going to do for the regional, not obviously Throne and Liberty is probably the priority, but in terms of the regions for Blue Protocol, Japan's maybe being seen as a lost cause now. The global launch is going to be more of a priority, and it's going to be delayed to factor that in and maybe change a lot of this stuff. I think I'm being a little bit optimistic and naive here, but you know, whatever.
Another
not a great look for farming though.
To do dungeons, which goes back to my previous point that it's just.
Do you like the UI though?
New players. Typically, post-release, new players get carried into these dungeons by veteran players farming the dungeon on their alt classes. Today, players pretty much don't need to know what their class does to reach endgame farming.
See, that sucks. That's one thing, like, as a new player, I'd rather be on the struggle bus and learn what I'm doing, learn my class, learn my abilities, learn my rotation, you know, learn how to work with the enemies, to deal the best damage, to do what you're supposed to be doing without just being dragged through it by veterans.
Dungeons and reach max gear score right after. So when players go from content that doesn't require much level thinking to immediately content that requires them to know
leveling a max gear, 90% of combat content, touching keyboard and mouse. Combat content after first point, know how to stack buffs and debuffs, know how DR works. Well, if you can get your damage reduction to 0, then that's definitely something you need to know. Understand when to dodge if DR is an orb, how to rotate buffs with other players, how to do a standard DPS rotation. Touching keyboard and mouse.
Buffs and debuffs, know how DR works, understand how to dodge if DR isn't available, how to rotate buffs with other players, how to do a basic rotation or like even DPS on the class, then they don't want to run it anymore because it's too daunting to learn everything at once in order to not grief the run. Once you understand all these concepts though, then you realize that the content is actually pretty easy. And trust me when I say that many players do not understand how to play their class or understand the gearing system. For example,
that's a situation. Why don't they bring a system in like that you've got in Final Fantasy where new players can run with AI, so they're not getting dragged through like that. So they're not too worried about griefing a raid, and they can actually learn at their own pace.
There's many players that endgame.
Hopefully, obviously on launch it'll be a lot easier for us because everybody be starting off at the same point.
It's common to have classes that give 10 to 20% debuffs to enemies, and these players are not casting these skills for most of the
I'm loving the
farming
character
runs.
design though.
So realistically, the only big motivation left if the fights aren't that good yet is the progression. However, even progression has its problems. It's a sucky feeling to have to grind a copy-pasted dungeon when there isn't much content to use it on as an average player. Then after about 1 or 2 months, most of the gear you grinded for becomes irrelevant as new copy-pasted dungeons get released offering slightly stronger gear. And then according to a survey Bandai done in October of 2023, only 5% of their player base actually cared about extremely challenging content where you have to use min-max gear.
Not gonna lie though, I think that's kind of common though, isn't it? Even in most games, even in MMOs, the majority of the player base isn't gonna be a min-maxers going after all the hardcore content. Any game, that's the case, isn't it really? Majority of the casual part of the player base is gonna be MSQ, doing some raids, gearing up, changing the way the character looks, maybe doing some PvP if the game's got it, the social aspect of the game, and then end game content. But I think the hardcore stuff is still the smallest part of the game for most people. Could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that's how it is for the majority of games, isn't it really?
Bandai continues to release these types of challenging content that a small fraction of the player
okay.
base cares about.
Okay, yeah. He's saying exactly, he's about to say exactly what I'm thinking. So, okay, so if that's what they're concentrating the patches and the updates on, it's kind of senseless.
While continuing to release copy-pasted content for the majority audience.
Okay, that's crazy.
That's what's actually being shown to JP players in these live streams and why JP people are upset. They feel neglected that content is being isolated for only...
It's kind of like when games listen to streamers and content creators and kind of create content for them and ignore the mass audience, or when you get games that try and cater towards the esports side of things a little bit too hard and ignore that the majority of the player base is casual and they get kind of gated out of the content that's coming, and then they just get trash extras basically.
Single-digit % of the player base. On top of that, most of the newer challenging content is generally a clear once for the new cosmetics and then never again type of content. So naturally, less people would want to try it as there isn't enough incentive to do it. There isn't enough content in the game that would make that.
Dude, this all sucks so bad because looking at the game, it looks freaking awesome, I think.
Average player want to keep playing. Now, if the content wasn't the deal breaker, it would be the amount of bugs and unoptimizations the game is riddled with. The 1-2-1 error bug is a notable one. It happens very often in solo instances if your ping happened to spike for any reason for a fraction of a second. The game would kick you out and you would often lose all your progress in the solo instance.
What is going on there?
This is incredibly frustrating within instances where you are in there for almost 10 minutes and suddenly you get kicked. 1-2-1 error code can also happen in raid activities where too many skills are registering on a single target, causing the boss to be unable to fight back or do anything, while also occasionally disconnecting some of the people in the raid.
That blows.
Disconnection mid-raid can also cause people to be temporarily banned from doing raids. Keep in mind that these raids are on an hourly schedule.
That's it. So that's going to be a player-based killer. I can understand that.
Being kicked out of one might mean that you have to wait a few hours until the next raid is up.
That's a big rip.
It's incredibly frustrating, and there doesn't seem to be like any sort of...
It's going to get a lot of people just instant uninstall. Fuck that shit, rage quit, I'm going to play something else. Obviously Genshin Impact by the look at the Japanese charts.
In sight, as it's been happening for months now. And then that's just one bug out of 180 plus bugs listed on the official Blue Protocol page. If you want to check out the rest of the bugs for yourself, I will post a link in the description below. And then there's also some optimizations like camera being jarring on some classes, the pain of auto picking up low level gear and having to sell it later, the amount of clicks needed to upgrade plugs or gear. All of these are not that big, but
but they are quality of life things that build up when leveling up gear becomes a chore beyond farming, but actually just leveling it up in the UI or the menu or whatever you're doing becomes that becomes a pain in the butt. First time you do it, okay. Second time, okay. When you're dozens of times in, that's when it becomes a problem. quality of life, things like that are major. Might seem small, but it does build up.
To the amalgamation of issues that would otherwise burn average player out. Now, with all that in mind, there's still a lot that Bandai has done well in the game. The Be Imagine system, which might be where Withering Waves got the idea for Echoes, is very fun to use. The skills are nice to use, and there's a lot of optimizations you can do with them to make them very fluid. The graphics are...
Dude, Wuthering Waves did just look at everybody and was like, stealing your homework, I'm stealing your homework. Let's have a little peek over your shoulder. I don't hate them for it either, because I love Wuthering Waves. I see a lot of people get mad about that with games when a game comes out and it's got mechanics or a similar style to another game, and it gets them so mad. And I'm like, at the end of the day, it means a new good video game for me. Copy all the homework you want to.
Great if you have a strong enough PC to handle it. The story is decent. All of this
I
shows
say, it does
that the
look
game
good.
has potential to pop off if it's managed better. I think management needs to understand who its target audience is and cater to them, and not the 5% sweaty tryhards.
Right? Casual waifu lovers who maybe want to play an MMO with the waifu anime style to it. That's just what it is, really, isn't it? It's people who like Genshin and anime but want that all wrapped up in an MMO.
These guys are killing most of the casuals by releasing fun content that they cannot do.
Wild that is when devs
Just
do
look
that.
at WildStar or currently Lost Ark. These two games aren't popular, with one of the problems being the devs care way too much about the hardcore player base and not giving enough attention to everyone else. Blue Protocol seems to be following that same path, and I hope they don't stick with it. With the new arena content shown where you fight this like boss out of Terra, looks very exciting, and I can't wait to try it out. Unfortunately,
This is where a lot of devs mess up with the balance, don't they? Of course, you want to cater to your hardcore player base. It's probably potentially going to be more loyal for a longer period of time. But you've got to make sure you're catering to the casuals as well. The people who are going to have a lot of turnover, they're going to come, they're going to go, they're going to come back again, they're going to tell the friends, they're going to come, they're going to go. That's how you grow a community. Just catering to that hardcore base is inevitably going to just dwindle till it gets smaller and smaller, and they begin to leave anyway because the game is becoming empty and nobody wants to play a game, especially an MMO or any sort of live service game that's got a dwindling player base. And even that loyal hardcore player base is going to move on at the end of the day after a while. So yeah, it's a shame when you see developers doing that. Like, they're really getting the balance wrong in catering to the player base.
it's another piece of content that's
Hopefully,
not supposed to be cleared by
that doesn't
at least
happen when it comes to the
90% of
West.
player base.
It's a bit
So
worrying.
if we're ever getting change, it won't be for a while, it seems. Bandai does seem like they're releasing mini games as update and housing and a
Dude, it's a
future
shame as well
update.
because the game looks
Maybe
great,
there's
man.
still hope for the majority, but I hope they do something about the combat and the progression, which are the game's main selling points at the moment besides the cosmetics. Well, anyways, if you want to see the new update at the end of this month, stop by my Twitch channel. You will be able to chat with me in real time and see firsthand what it's like playing
Cactus.
Blue Protocol.
Definitely
I'll
have to
be
check him out
covering
on
it when
Twitch.
it first comes out in June 26. If you'd like to stay informed about Blue Protocol's
that's today.
progress or want to see more Blue Protocol content, be sure to like and subscribe. This was very fun to make, and I enjoyed informing everyone on the situation. Thank you all
Definitely
for
subscribe.
watching, and catch you all in the next one.
Definitely go check
Peace.
out a Cactus, small channel, great video that is. Obviously he's played a lot of Blue Protocol, seems to know what he's talking about. It is definitely worrisome. It's a thing that hopefully when it does get a global launch, all of those things are definitely fixable. Bugs and catering to the casuals and the main part of the player base, and doing it for both, really, for the hardcore and the casuals, just getting that balance right. But obviously, it's Amazon. You know, suppose maybe I'm being optimistic, but I like to be when it comes to games. You know, be ever optimistic, get burnt more, or keep on thinking it's gonna be good. But I guess we'll wait and see. Definitely check out a Cactus. Good video that was. Blue Protocol game looks awesome though. Visually, it looks great. The UI, the art style, the color palettes, the characters. The graphics look beautiful as well, actually. Definitely something I'm going to be trying out. Can't wait to play it. But it's a bit of a damning view, and seems like a, you know, like it's a warranted view as well, doesn't it? From somebody who's played a lot of the games, and somebody who I would imagine he's quite hardcore himself, because talking about he was what, like second on the rankings in whatever mode it was. Yeah, man. Blue Protocol. Not looking good in Japan. Hopefully it looks better when it launches globally.